Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Janeen Pottinger, and welcome to Tropicalfete's Authors Connecting program. Today we're here with authors Yolanda Lezama-Clark and Dawad Philip, who wrote the book Jaidyn and the King of the Brooklyn Carnival, Cultural Warrior. Can we bring in Yolanda Lezama-Clark and Dawad Philip? Hello.
Hi there.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Yolanda Lezama-Clark. I'm one of the authors. We're waiting for Dawad Philip, but we co-wrote the book on Jaidyn and the King of the Brooklyn Carnival, which happens to be Carlos Lezama.
Interesting.
Yes. And I just wanted to also add that David Moore, who happens to be our illustrator of the book, is not able to be here today with us, but he does send greetings. And as you see for yourself, he was able to illustrate a lot of the beautiful pictures, which tells a huge story about the
really
Jaidyn and the king.
The illustrations are beautiful. I like that. Hi, Dawad.
Hi.
Hello. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Well, I'm Dawad Philip, and I live in Trinidad mostly now, but I'm lived all my life in Brooklyn, and I was happy to be a part of this project to sit down with Yolanda to get this story down on paper.
That's great. Thank you. Okay, before we start, would you like to read an excerpt from your book?
Pardon?
Before we start, would you like to read an excerpt from the book?
Oh, that's kind of, yeah. What I was telling myself, my plan was to do it to follow chapter 7, but perhaps I should do the introduction then, Yolanda, because I thought you were doing 7 and I would do 8.
Oh, okay.
To kind of sequence that.
Well, perhaps if you so you wanted to do 8. Let me then, Janeen, start with one of the stories in the book, and I'm really partial to this story. I tend to like it very much. It's one of my favorites, and it is about the year of the Crown Heights riots, and I call it the year that the carnival almost didn't happen. So on a hot August afternoon in 1991, 2 children were riding a bicycle on a sidewalk on President Street in Crown Heights, which is a neighborhood made up of West Indian residents as well as Orthodox Jews. While a motorcade was transporting the leader of the Jewish community toward their nearby headquarters, one vehicle in the convoy lost control, jumped the pavement, and rammed into 7-year-old Gavin Cato, killing him instantly. His cousin Angela, also 7, was seriously hurt. The boy's death triggered 3 nights and 2 days of violence as Black and Jewish residents turned on each other, resulting in fires, looting, and protest. When the uprising was brought under control, 2 people had died, nearly 200 hurt, and many people arrested. With only 2 weeks before the Labor Day Carnival, the call was made to call off the event over fears of more violence. The mayor and police commissioner were ready to stop the carnival, Grand said. Leaders from the Jewish community visited Carlos at his home, urging him to support the mayor and police for the sake of peace and safety. Carlos Lezama considered all that was said. In his mind, he remembered that rainy day in Jacksonville so long ago when he came face to face with the ugliness of Jim Crow laws, Grand shared. And now, with Crown Heights in flames, everyone was waiting for his decision. When newspapers and television reporters asked if he could call off Carnival, he responded, "As long as I am in charge of Carnival, it will go on. Nothing or no one will stop the parade. It is our day to show our cultural pride. It is our right." And I'm going to stop there because that happens to be the excerpt from that chapter that I tend to, it really grabs me. And it still does give me goosebumps. So I'm going to turn it back over to you, Janeen.
That was great. Thank you very much. Okay, so the first question is, what inspired you to write this book?
Well, I'll tell you, aside from Carlos Lezama being instrumental in bringing the event to Easton Parkway and in sustaining the carnival in Brooklyn for upwards of 34 years, which grew from basically a block party to about over 2 million people, according to police estimates. This was all done under his leadership. And a few things. We felt that it was important to share this story at this point. And also important to share it with the children, especially the youth. You have a lot of people that flock to Easton Parkway year after year, and they really don't know the struggles that had been faced to bring that event and to sustain it, over those years. So that was one. And the other thing is the importance of knowing about our history. And in addition, the importance that when we think of the contributions of Caribbeans, that they have really contributed so much to the diaspora, to New York City. And this is in terms of whether it be culturally, politically, socially, and financially. So that this event alone has spawned over 38 carnivals throughout the North America area. So there are a number of reasons. And lastly, in terms of gentrification, which has also affected us, and I think can also lead to the event being lost at some point. So those in a nutshell, there are quite a few, but those were the reasons why the book.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so what was the journey of getting your book published like? From the beginning ideas to going forth with your ideas?
The journey was number one. It involved um, getting my co-author on board with um, doing this. He has a lot of background. He was around for quite a number of years. So he was involved basically in the community and knew a lot about the struggles that took place over the years. So I reached out to him. The other piece was reaching out to the illustrator. Again, uh, uh, David Moore has a lot of experience in working with acrylic medium. He has been involved in doing painting and so forth since the 60s. And again, let me also note that he is a Trinidadian artist and illustrator. So he's well known. And so we felt that he was the obvious choice. In addition, we had to get a publisher. And it wasn't just one thing, but a number of steps, that took place, in order to get this done.
Dawad, do you have anything to say?
Well, pretty much what Yolanda says. The story of Carlos is the story of our presence in particularly in Brooklyn. Because the carnival would have started in Harlem, but once it came over the bridge and Rufus Goring brought the carnival to Brooklyn, and once Carlos aligned himself with Rufus and took over the organizing and bringing the resources and manpower to bear, it meant that Brooklyn, as we knew it, was going to be transformed. The wave of immigrants who came in the late 60s and particularly the early 70s would have been just the right timing to populate the culture, so to speak, so that by the time Carlos had moved the carnival to Easton Parkway, people were coming in droves from the islands, but Trinidad, all the islands, but there was a more open policy in terms of immigration, and with that flood of new arrivals brought the people to expand. You saw a huge expansion in the carnival and in the cultural life of Brooklyn. So that by the mid-70s, you had steel bands in every nook and cranny. You had masks all over the place. So that whole experience, and as Yolanda says in the excerpt that she read, when by the time this event happened in 1991, there was certainly a lot of political power. One of the things that was happening at that point was people were saying, well, West Indians don't vote. So, there was no enthusiasm to support something like the carnival. So in those early years, you would see Carlos and his crew literally sweeping Eastern Parkway after the parade, So you would imagine that, it wasn't 2 million people then, but it was enough people that the city didn't even send out the garbage the sanitation department to do anything on the Parkway. So that responsibility came down to the folks around the West Indian American Day Carnival, and people, Carlos, his wife, Angela Seeley, everybody, Errol Payne, everybody would be on the Parkway with brooms and big garbage bags. It looked like sharecropping in the South, in the cotton fields in the South, because they had to clean that Parkway, or it probably wouldn't happen. The next carnival wouldn't happen. So those are the kinds of sacrifices and kinds of experiences that we felt that if we're going to tell a story of Carlos, the story becomes, the centerpiece is Carlos. And in this case, the co-star is Jaidyn, because Jaidyn is driving the story. But as much as you're speaking about Carlos, you're speaking about the diaspora. You're speaking about those people who came to America, and what they brought wasn't in suitcases. What they brought were in their hearts and souls and their creative minds, you know? So that the carnival, as it happened, it expanded. So then Jersey Carnival came, and then Boston, and then Atlanta, and then Miami, and then, you know, and so telling that story was telling the story of our own journey in America. You know, in those days, in the early days, you could go in you could go in any poultry farm, and they would give you all the chicken neck and all the chicken feet and everything, and because they're not touching that, but you know, we go in and make sauce. You know what I mean? Or they could go in a fish market and they give you all the fish heads so you could make your fish broth. But then those same people realize, hey, wait a minute, these people, we could sell this. And so it started to, it became a commercial entity. So all of those kinds of things, it is our story wrapped up in this story. So in speaking to, in Grand speaking to Jaidyn, it is Grand speaking to all of us, to generations, you know, about some of the sacrifices that it took for the things that we take for granted. Wow. I quickly wanted to give my 2 books of poetry, the new books, this new one and this other one. So City Twilight and A Mural by the Sea, and say they're available on Amazon. And then I'll now read, since it's Labor Day and it's summer, I would read the chapter 8, which Jaidyn goes to a mass camp. And you know, in speaking about, like for instance, this chapter, it's really speaking about my own children, you know, the curiosity that they would have come up with and want to go to the mass camp. And then I was bringing mass so that they were inside there. And so it was an easy story to tell in that sense. Jaidyn was mesmerized by all he'd heard about Carlos Lezama and the history of the Labor Day Carnival. He was impressed by his grandmother's way of making her stories come to life. She had fired his imagination. Now he wanted more. Grand, can we go see how the costumes for the parade are made? He begged. Grand agreed, and they would visit both a mass camp where they were preparing costumes, and a pan yard where a steel band would be readying for the grand panorama competition on Labor Day Saturday. One warm Saturday, a few weeks before the parade, Grand and Jaidyn rode the bus to Flatbush, where most of the masquerade bands had showrooms advertising their portrayals and displays. On Church Avenue, they walked a short way up a busy block to a storefront with a banner hung from the store's awning. It read, "Register now, Labor Day Carnival, from the kingdoms of Africa. More information inside." In the brightly lit window were several mannequins for adults and children. The costumes on display were colorfully made with rich braids, jewels, zebra and leopard prints, bright plumes, and long pheasant feathers. "Come in," the young woman at the door welcomed them. Jaidyn had seen costumes at the Kiddies Carnival on the Saturday before the big parade on Labor Day. He had gone with his mom, dad, and grand on the big parade day. Spectators lined Easton Parkway to witness the masqueraders as they danced to the sounds of soca, reggae, zouk, and cadence, proudly waving their national flags and making their way to the judges' stand at the Brooklyn Museum. But never had he seen how the costumes were made. Grand explained to the young woman who showed each design and registered those wishing to join the masquerade that her grandson had never seen the inside of a mass camp. The woman smiled at the boy. "So what's your name?" she asked. "Jaidyn," he answered softly. "Well, Jaidyn, I'm Sharon. Let's see what we can do." She ushered Jaidyn and Grand behind a heavy curtain to the back of the store, where rooms were crowded with folds of fabric and braids of every description, jewels of all sizes and colors, wire sculptures for headdresses hung on lines made of rope, and costumes in many stages of completion. People were sewing and making brown paper patterns. Others with electric glue guns were gluing decorations onto loincloths and chess pieces. There was lots of music and laughter as everyone worked. "This is where we spend the night and day to get ready for the parade," Sharon explained. She showed the designs for men and women. The front line, which she said were for section leaders who would lead the masqueraders come Labor Day. Those costumes, she said, would have many more plumes and fancy decorations. "And over here, Jaidyn," she pointed, "are the designs for kids. This year, our children are playing the young princes and princesses of Africa." Indeed, the costumes were beautiful. They featured purple and iridescent brocade, golden crowns with rubies, emeralds, diamonds of all sizes, rich braids, and flowing robes. The girls' costumes had plumes of many colors, jeweled necklaces, and many bangles. "Wow," Jaidyn said. "Would you like to join our kiddies' presentation?" she asked. He looked at Grand and smiled. "Sure you can," Grand said. I'll stop there.
That was great. That was very nice. Okay, so I wanted to ask, what is your favorite aspect of the carnival?
No, I'm not. Are you hearing me?
Yes.
I'm hearing you.
Oh, what is your favorite aspect of the carnival?
Okay, I think I'm hearing you a little better now.
Hello? What is your favorite aspect of the carnival?
I could tell you what my favorite aspect is.
Thank you.
And it's usually the period leading up. I tend to get a little withdrawn and sad the day of because I know that it's almost over. But so I tend to like the preparation, everything that has to do with the prep. Okay, the costuming, going around to the mass cams and seeing the people getting involved, listening to the music. In addition, the steel band guys usually are practicing. And so making those visits to the pan yards, Um, and just the camaraderie that's involved, that unity that's involved with the community. So when the day comes, it's like, unless of course I'm playing in a band. But again, it's just the prep, and where everybody seems to be busybodies. It's just like around Christmas time when we're preparing the sorrel and the ginger beer, and getting all of the ham and all of the goodies together. Basically, it's the same thing for me where Carnival is concerned. I love all of the steps leading up to the event.
That's great. We have a question from one of the viewers, and it says, "What about the All Mass?"
Well, of course, that too. That's also part of it as well, and I love it all.
That's great. Dawad, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, so would you like to answer the question, what is your favorite aspect of the carnival?
Of the carnival? Well, I like the kings and queens. It's always the show that I like to be around. And mainly because I know all the people who make the costumes. I'm one of them. So I like the camaraderie, the competitiveness. I like the whole idea of the braggadocio that comes with that. Who and the we bad talk each other behind each other's backs. Say, nice stupidity, play that last year and thing. I like all of that excitement, but when it works and those costumes come on the stage and you see it, and the lights go up and you see the magic, that's my particular. I think that's my particular time in the carnival.
There's usually a lot of excitement, and with the excitement, it brings that energy, that feeling that you have inside, that built up feeling, that comes with it. The energy of the guys practicing for the panorama, and the people stitching and the beads and sticking them on with the glue. Yeah, it's just that feeling that you.
It's
a magical.
It's like they say, it's a vibe. It's a vibe, but I think most of the times, what happens behind the scenes of the carnival is where my adrenaline gets worked up. That I used to be around the steel band, so we go into panorama and suddenly something happen, a stand breakdown, or the drummer, something happened with the drummer, you can't find the drummer or some kind of thing, or even with the mask, when you backstage, you see the real tensions and the real anxieties and the touch and go of it. Because nobody knows what it took to get that costume to stay on that man. It was glue and press, glue and press, and then and you going up there with fear and trepidation because you're only praying that he or she, the queen or the king or whoever is carrying that costume, you're only praying that they could carry it, and you're coaxing them like a coach. You could do it. You could just focus and and to see it happen and hear the crowd erupt. It's carnival is vibes. Carnival is energy. All about it. It's energy.
Real energy.
And it's our particular energy. Nobody else could duplicate that the way we do that.
Yeah.
That's such a great point. Thank you. Okay, another question from one of the viewers. Say, have you guys ever played mass?
I think the question with me is, have I ever not played math? No, of course I play. All my life, I may have missed. I tell you what happened. The Labor Day, and it's not a knock on the Labor Day, but it just got to where the energy and the love we used to have in the early years. But I tell you what, Labor Day is always going to be Labor Day. I would come out there, but I would definitely go to see the Juve, and I would come out on the Parkway. I played mad. It was years since I had put on a costume on the Parkway. But just that vibe. But you see, the thing was that I think when the DJs and the crowds came, to me it lost some of the magic, as opposed to when the steel bands came up the Parkway.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when the steel bands came up the Parkway, it was there was a quality and an energy going on there. But and then the Labor Day, what a lot of what you probably wouldn't have experienced is in the early years, up until Giuliani had come into the carnival, we were able to leave our mass camps wherever that was and come right up the road and line up and come up the Parkway. And when we came off the judging, turn and go whichever way we want to go and end up back in our mass camps or in our panyards
with the
and
music.
all of that. You know, so the vibe, I could tell you about 10 o'clock in the night, 11 o'clock in the night, steel bands still coming across St. John's or Flatbush or Church Avenue. So it was a different kind of experience, you know, and we just got legislated out. Well, of course, the crime came. The crime may have had a bit to do with that, but I think also it was the forces that be, I think they were looking for any excuse to kind of contain that. The communities, the surrounding communities, in fact, that was always a struggle, as Yolanda read in chapter 7 there about the Jewish community and the riots around Gavin Cato. It was never an easy task to get the carnival, or even now, as we speak, you know, in the panyards up to the last panorama I was reading. I'm in Trinidad, but I'm reading about one of the Karens in the area there calling the police every night on, you know, on the steel bands around, and thank God, the people themselves in the community, the majority, are happy to have something to do for the summer. I mean, these are white people, all kinds of people. I remember one year we went down to Greenwich Village for Halloween, and the band that went down there was Golden Stars. And we went down in the village, and I mean, they were playing all night long, Lionel Richie's all night long. And when the police tried to stop them, the people, village people, formed a ring around the steel band and told the police, you can't do that. You know what I'm saying? So that was the energy we brought to the carnival, and we brought to New York. And I have something else to tell you. In 2023, it would be 100 years of carnival in New York City. And you need to link into that and start spread the word. It would be 100 years since Jesse Waddle and those folks up in Harlem started the carnival. 100 years in 2023. So we're at 98 years right now.
Wow.
That's historic.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah,
Well, there you go.
because the story, you have the book. So please open it up later on and go through it a little bit more in detail, because the book does tell you about the fact that we had a Trinidadian woman by the name of Jessie Waddle, as Dawad
Mhm.
just mentioned, who started the event in Harlem, USA.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that event stayed there for a while until the early 60s. And then it was, they did take away the permit,
Mm-hmm.
which I will have the viewers purchase the book and get into. I don't want to spoil it for them too much.
Mm-hmm.
But before it came, before it came to Brooklyn, it was in Harlem.
Oh wow.
Mhm. And I just want to add that because I respect this man very much, it was at that time Rufus Gorin who brought the event over to Brooklyn in the early 60s. You know, so but again, I don't want to spoil it too much for the viewers.
That's great. Thank you for sharing.
Sure. And that's what the book gets into all of that. Let me just tell you the chapter one. We wanted to give the reader a picture of life in the Brooklyn community during the summer months. Okay. And so this chapter describes a setting with, for example, smoke from the barbecue pits that we would pass along if you walk down streets like Utica Avenue or St. John's Place or Nostrand Avenue. You will run into the smoke pits, the barbecue pits. You would hear the rhythm of reggae or even soca playing, right, Janine?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so you will see also Caribbean sidewalk vendors. And of course, you would be, one would also hear the different accents because, as Dawad mentioned, back in the 60s or early 50s, you did have an influx of folks coming in from the Caribbean.
Mm-hmm.
And hence the reason why our event here, the carnival here in Brooklyn, grew so large. It expanded and it grew, very large, where, it's considered the grandfather of all the carnivals. Am I correct, Dawad?
Well, in North America for sure.
Yeah, that well, of course, in North
Mhm.
America. We're not talking about Trinidad here.
Well, no, but there's still London and there's still, uh,
Mhm.
and Toronto came right after. So,
Right.
yeah.
Mhm.
But the thing about it is all of that. That's what the book does. The book speaks to food. The book s- talks about a bakery experience. You talk about things that you love. I love that part of the story, the bakery experience, and people from different islands talking about bread. And
Mhm.
that for me alone is magical. So you should. It's a lot. You get a lot out of this story.
Yeah, chapter 2 talks about how in the past associating with a steel band was a no-no,
Hmm.
or even a cultural band was frowned on. And at that point, you had laws that were passed to suppress African and Indian cultural expression. So it also talks about Carlos and how he became involved with Pan during the early years. So that is just to give you an idea. Chapter 3 gives a bit of history on how the oil drums were fashioned into instruments that, of course, came to be known as the steel pan. Um, Chapter 4 gives us a little experience where segregation was concerned during the Jim Crow period as he traveled to Jacksonville. And I alluded to that in my excerpt when I read chapter 7 earlier. You have chapter 6 that talks about the event that moved to Brooklyn. And so after a new organization was formed, Carlos became involved and was elected as president when he then connected to Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm, who also provided her support of the culture, gave very strong support at that time. So we go into a lot throughout the chapters, although it's a children's book and it's written for ages 8 to and up. I would say and up. Basically, it was 8 to say 17, but I think anyone can pick it up and appreciate the culture.
Yes. Okay, have you ever thought of expanding this book and making a documentary to keep your father's legacy alive?
Well, expanding it to make a documentary, that is a thought. And I would say what sort of shortcut our goal over the past year was the pandemic. Before leaving Trinidad last year, we had a book launch at the National Library of Trinidad and Tobago under the auspices of the minister Donna Cox, and so we had a lot of plans after that. But of course, after I got back to New York from Trinidad in March of last year, 2020, things sort of went on hold. But yes, that is a brilliant idea and something that we have explored. Yes. So now that we are things have seemed to be going in a better direction. Hopefully we could look into it. Yes.
But I think just to add to what you're saying, I think it's important for the community to advocate to have a book like this within the school curriculum, because it belongs in the classroom. It just is the kind of cultural experience that we need at this time in our history, and it's doable if the community supports it, because everyone gains with that. The book breaks down a lot of taboos. So people who look at it from outside, you get to understand the carnival from the inside of it, and I think you become less apprehensive, less stiff about that.
Yes,
So of things to do, let's add that to the list.
yes. I agree, because I learned a lot about carnival from this one book that I didn't learn in school. So I think that it's a great idea to put it into the school learning system. Yes, I agree.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Perhaps you could even tell your teachers, and I'm not sure how that works. I'm not sure if teachers introduce literature to the classroom. It has to come from the curriculum. So, and I'm sure it does come from a strict curriculum. But you need to advocate to get this in there on the book list.
Yes, I agree 100%. Okay, at the inception of the Carlos Lezama Foundation, I believe your agenda was to make a museum. Is that still one of your goals?
Yes, it happens to be, yes. Let me just give you a little bit about the mission. CLACSI's, which is the Carlos Lezama Archives and Caribbean Cultural Center, Our mission is devoted to the development, the promotion, and preservation of Caribbean culture and history through the collection of archives and art memorabilia. So this is a learning and resource center, and our goal is to continue to provide historical, social, and cultural information on Caribbean life. So one of our signature events has been a children's an annual children's festival and youth pan fest. And it does take money to develop and create that goal, which is something that we have been working on. And we're looking at doing something later on this year.
Wow. That was like a great idea. Okay. So in the book, you mentioned the netball court. What is the connection between that and your farm?
Well, it just happens that back in the early, let me see, the late 90s. No, not even that far back. The early, yeah, in around 2003 or so, maybe 2004. It was borough president at the time, Marty Markowitz, who wanted to name the courts there at Lincoln Terrace Park. And so because those courts, at that court, we have the Labor Day breakfast every year, the annual Labor Day breakfast. He thought it fitting to name the court after Carlos Lezama. And so it was mentioned in the book that Jaidyn and his grandmother sat in the park, and as he looked up and saw the sign, that green and white sign called the Carlos Lezama Netball Courts, that was when the conversation began between Jaidyn and his grandmother, Gran. He then asked the question in the story, who is Carlos Lezama? And so that's basically how Gran in the story begins to tell about the life of Carlos.
That's
It's also, I think that you also could mention that very early on, I've been trying to think of the first year that, and that's Rochester Park.
Yeah.
That, we did have the carnival go from
at one point.
Prospect Park to Rochester Park that one year. And I think that kind of brought Rochester Park into a different kind of way of seeing it. In fact, there was a lot of debate as to whether it should remain that way, where the carnival ended in Rochester Park, as opposed to Prospect Park. So Rochester Park has that relevance also.
Wow. Okay. Was there any point in this journey of you guys publishing the book and writing the book where you wanted to just give up and not finish the book at all?
No,
I don't think so.
no, it was that thought never came to mind, honestly. When we started that journey, we had to finish it. So we wanted it to tell the story, which we did, and perhaps another story later on. Maybe there may be a part two, huh? What do you say, Dawad? there could be a part two to this story.
Listen, the story.
There's so much,
Listen, just
so much
really,
to
this,
tell.
the book really touches on a big story, you know. But the thing is that there's sufficient in the book as it is, as you correctly say,
Mm-hmm.
that could be expanded on in all kinds of ways, in terms of a documentary, in terms of telling those stories, you know. But it since as the producer of the project, we don't have any sponsors. I think we have to take it a step at a time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I
You know.
see I see a question that's popping up. Why not rename Easton Parkway after your dad? Let me just say that at the corner of St. John's Place and Brooklyn Avenue, the street was named after my dad. It's called Carlos Lazama Way. And so while we appreciate the thought, I think maybe on a larger level, if we were to look a little bit bigger than that, there have been thoughts about renaming Eastern Parkway Caribbean Parkway. And so if we were to look at it, a little bit more globally, that
Oh,
might be the suggestion. But we have the Carlos Lazama Way at Brooklyn Avenue and St. John's. We also have the Carlos Lazama Netball Courts. We have the Carlos Lazama Archives and Caribbean Cultural Center, and I would encourage our guests to log into claxi.org to also get additional information on our organization and look at some of the things that we have done and what we are about to do. That's claxi.org, claccc.org, O-R-G.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so about how long did writing the book and publishing the book take?
okay. Well, the writing part. How long was that, Yolanda? I think about 3 months.
Or
4
more.
months. 4 months.
Maybe about four or five.
About about 4 months.
Mm-hmm.
4 months. 4 months. But the two things were working in tandem. So while the book was being written, Yolanda was doing the other parts, all the other parts that would put that to make sure they were in place, the illustrations, the finding the printer, finding, the publishers, working out all those. Making a book is not simply just writing a book. So it takes a whole lot. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. It takes a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you something. Just getting back to David for a minute. David Moore, while we knew David and we had some work that we had commissioned by David at some point, and two of his works appear in the story as well. While we knew of him, he wasn't the first choice. And I mean, we thought about different artists, different illustrators, and for some reason, I didn't think of David. And one day, I think I might have gotten up from sleep. He popped into my mind. And I said, wait a minute, we already have two of his works that we commissioned, And so there were carnival scenes that he had painted based on some pictures that we sent to him. And they're beautifully done, and you will see it as well. Again, Janine,
Mm-hmm.
it's in the story. And then, I mean, it was like the lights went off. I had an aha moment, you know?
I think the lights went on.
Okay, yeah. It went on. It went on, yes. And so I said, my God, sometimes y- you're not really looking. I mean, you have to, I mean, sometimes things are in your own yard. It's right in front of you
Absolutely.
and you don't even see it,
Yeah.
and so that was my aha moment. My
Mm-hmm.
God, why not David? So of course I called David right away that same morning. It might have been about 7 o'clock when it came to us, and at about I couldn't wait to talk to him. So maybe about 8, 9 o'clock, I called him right away, and of course he said yes. But that was I really look at it as everything happening by divine intervention. Honestly, it seemed to have to be. Just everything that was done for this book. Yeah.
Okay. So there's a question in the chat, and it says, "Do you see passing on your work to your daughter to continue the journey?"
Well, I'm sure she has been also very involved with giving us ideas for the book. But basically, as I think it was Michael in the chat who also mentioned that it is unfinished. This
Mm-hmm.
this book is basically a snapshot of the Carlos Lezama story. And so there's so much more, to tell. He was involved with the Miami and the Orlando Carnival. And he also was one of the inspirations behind what was called at the time, and I hope that it will continue at some point, but the International Carnival Association. So there's a lot to tell. His involvement with Juve, and the fact that when the police saw these people coming out at 5 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, and all this noise, steel band beating and iron and whatnot in the road, people jumping up and having a good time.
Yeah.
They called him. The police called him, and of course he had to share that this is a spiritual thing, and that it is the event before the actual carnival that starts on the Parkway. So there's a lot to tell, in this story. So perhaps there will be to be continued, and maybe Leah, my daughter, will have some input in that. I'm sure.
That's great.
I think it's a good time. I wanted, since we on the topic of that topic, that extend condolences to the family of Kelvin Fuzzy Davis and the Carnival Fraternity in New York. With the passing of Kelvin Fuzzy,
Yes.
he's one of the champions of the mass movement, and came from a background of started with George Bailey in Trinidad, came to New York and put in a good 40 years in the carnival. So it's a huge loss, and we send our love and condolences to his family.
Absolutely. He was also a friend of my dad's. They shared the same order of Rosicrucianists. So we do want to extend our condolences. In addition, one of our members passed on this week, Ben Flores. He was also part of the West Indian American Day Carnival Association, and he too passed on. So we want to extend our condolences to his family as well.
Yes. I'm so sorry to hear that.
Thank you. Thank you.
So the title of your book is very unique. Jaidyn and the King of the Brooklyn Carnival Cultural Warrior. It's a very nice title. I actually really like it. Was there any other options for the title of your book?
Options? Well, let me just say that because we knew that this was a book for children, and the Jaidyn, which is based on an 8-year-old. He was 8 at the time when we wrote it, and so it's a true story about Jaidyn, who is a very curious child. Hence, we chose, why not have a story where the child would pose questions to his grandmother, and the grandmother also, based on a true story, was from the Rogers family, and who also lived in the building where my family had also lived for a while here in Brooklyn. So they knew about my dad, and so it was basically true. A lot of the information was true, was factual. So this is a creative biography that is made for children, written for children.
That's good.
For young readers, I would say.
Yes, young readers and as well as adults who can appreciate this story.
Yes, thank you. Okay, knowing the things that you know now, what advice would you give your past self?
What advice? Well, let me just say this. The advice, I wouldn't even. I'm not even thinking along those lines. I'm thinking more along the lines of what I would like for people to take away from this story. And so an appreciation, basically, it would be an appreciation and understanding of the Brooklyn community, and how we grew. And also because Carlos was so focused, he was so very involved, and he had a determined mindset. I think for the youth, it's basically, I think that takeaway would be a strong sense of tenacity and the importance that it plays in leadership, in a leadership role. So when you ask about what was it, what I would do different, or
what advice would you give your past self?
What advice? I don't know. Dawad, what advice would you give to yourself?
I would don't throw out all those newspaper articles that you wrote. Don't throw out all those artifacts that you collected. Don't treat those things like they're worthless, because now I realize how priceless those things are. A lot of mass and collect. I would collect. That's the advice I would give my young self. Collect.
Yeah, and you know something? Yeah, like uh, okay, if I could piggyback on that thought, I would think I would. The advice for me would be to not wait too long to reach out to folks who have been there,
Mm.
you know, and who can provide that information. I thought about Fuzzy after I heard of his passing, and I said, "Oh my God, we could have reached out to Fuzzy to get some additional information as well." You know, it would basically to reach out to people, you know, and if you have something like this in mind, it would be to make sure that you know before it's too late, you know,
Well,
speak to them
Mhm.
and get the necessary information.
Mhm.
well, that's the thing. That's the thing, and the problem is that they passing on one by one, and we still haven't done anything to archive these things to do anything about it in terms
Mhm.
of for posterity and for you, Janine, is for you guys to have to say, well, this is what we did, and this is so you
Mhm.
have a reference.
Yeah.
Right. Mhm.
Thank you. That was really good. Like, just thinking about it, I'm deep in thought about it, Wow. Thank you for answering all my questions. I now know more than I did before this interview. Thank you so much. So now we have another guest that we would like to bring on, Mr. Keith. Is he here?
Williams Road. And when he sent me the invoice, I'm like, okay, all right, thanks. 3,000 and change.
Okay. So we can do you have anything to say to the viewers that are watching from home now
So,
before we bring on Mr. Keith?
Prospect Park,
This is who. I'm not sure who that's directed to. Keith.
But do you have anything that you would like to say to the viewers before we bring him on?
Oh no, well, in terms of Keith has been in the trenches forever. Keith is one of those people that we have to cherish, and it's been hard at work over all these years. And there's so many stories like that. I mean, the story of Pan Alley is a story that should be told. The story of when we were able to, for a moment in time, lift or bring all the possibilities for Pan into one place. All those stories are stories to be told.
Yeah.
Um,
And
and, and- yeah, go ahead.
well, as you're mentioning that, well, remember the CLACC organization did host what was called Pan Lime back in January, February,
Mhm.
and so
Right.
we did touch a little bit on.
Well, yeah, that was right. You're right. But
Mhm.
what I'm saying, it has to be written. Well, I mean,
Yeah,
it's recorded. It is recorded. But, there's plenty of work to be done. I
yeah,
mean, and,
yeah.
and we need to be serious about getting some of it, you know.
Yeah.
It's enough for all of us to do. So,
Mhm.
and for your generation to come up and take the baton and start.
Absolutely.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Hello, Mr. Keith.
good night, folks.
Good
How
night.
are you doing?
We're
All right,
good.
good. Mr. Phillips and Miss Clark,
Yes,
nice to see you guys on.
Thank
Mhm.
you.
I have a question, and it has to do with book two, if there's a book two. And I surely hope there is a book two. Is there anything that, having foresight of what you have done so far in this book, Is there anything that you think that you may have accidentally omitted that you would be willing to, book two, put it in? Anything at all from the aspect of the history and stuff like that? Is there anything at all that you can think of at this point in
Well,
time?
I could think of a lot of things that we. First of all, it's a book for young people, and that in itself puts some parameters in place. One of the things that I had to struggle with is how long with a book like that? How long is a young person's attention span? In a book, and how to make it attractive enough so that when a young person picks up the book, they're engaged enough to do that. But to tell the story, a good place is that one of the chapters that spoke about the Jim Crow South, where Carlos comes up on the boat, and then he lands in Jacksonville in the rain. He goes to buy something to eat, and not to give away the whole book, but the kinds of confrontations. But how do I put this in a way, and we get to tell the story for younger people, but it is a story that has the possibilities to understand how the West Indian diaspora in America would have, confronted those very things that Stokely would have confronted in the South. Carlos, and Carlos, even in terms of speaking about in the chapter that the carnival that almost wasn't, that story is so much deeper and so more complex. You have to understand that this was the first black mayor in New York City at the time, David Dinkins. And you have to understand that how that was playing out in terms of racial terms, how the Jewish community was reacting to that, how even within the black community, the schism between the African American community in some ways and the African Caribbean community, rather than being a cohesive whole, became a fractured part of it until this thing came together. And in something like that, I would want to talk more about folks like like Sonny Carson, for instance, as radical and as controversial as he was. So what I'm saying, Keith, is that this is a story for younger readers. There's a story that, like we say, that still there's a whole larger story that has to be dealt with. You wouldn't want to put riots and all kinds of things in a young reader's book, how those things played out.
And that was a question when we were talking about that particular incident that took place. I know that there was a lot of discomfort and there had to be, you had to mildly approach the topic, especially because you had you're dealing with young readers. So you had to be very delicate in your approach.
So yes, Keith, there is so much to expand on in the story. This is a preamble to really a much bigger story to be told.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see that. I mean, I see expansion on specifically with the children's carnival, right? The children's mass and so forth. I can see that coming down the road, and for the perspective of children, that would definitely draw their attention, and because that's their thing. They'll be able to identify with that. So I mean, I see so much room, right? So much room and so many different directions that you guys can go,
Absolutely.
with this. I mean, I think it's outstanding. I think it's outstanding project, and hats off to you guys. Hats off to
And
you
I would
guys
hope,
for taking on this project.
thank you, and I would hope that more of our nonprofit organizations, our Caribbean nonprofit organizations, can purchase the book for their young people, for their youth groups,
Yes.
so that they could share this story with them.
I mean,
I heard what you said before.
even for this as a summer reading project, you know what I mean? All these youth camps should have the.
I was just about to say that. All the different non-for-profit Caribbean organizations, right, can buy up some and have it distributed to the summer camps. With especially with the governor opening things, as he said today, summer camps may be opening up. That's an opportunity for the history to be shown to kids because again, a lot of them have Caribbean heritage. So it's a way of opening up that that idea in the head and stuff like that. And again, we in a state of kind of still sheltered living. So there's a lot of reading and a lot of history to get caught up on. And again, I see so much room for growth with this book. I envision so many different things for you guys. And again, fantastic job. I love David Moore. There's a certain person when they come by me, they come into my foyer and they see a bunch of David Moore paintings and they say they will start stealing them. So man, I love his work. I love his work.
You see him in many kitchens. Many kitchens and dining rooms. You can see his work.
Yeah, I have the one in Ostaz Panya. I have the guy was cutting some banana and he walked around with the banana and cutlass hanging on the side. There's one I have with the lady going to church with the little child in the morning. And there's another one of my favorite. And I always say it looked like Mova, but it looked like Pitiboo. There's a view of looking down on houses from a hill. And I said, God, but you watch that and you say, man, Jesus, Lord, I could be there right now. I could be there right now. The book is very good. Fiction and his part in your book is fantastic. Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, I've known you guys for years, and I admire the history that you guys have here in Brooklyn Carnival and with the Caribbean community at home. And again, I love the work you did. Janeen, fantastic job. And Yolanda Dawad, again, you guys did a fantastic job. And I'm looking forward to book 2. Right? I'm really looking forward to book 2.
Yes.
Thank
and
you.
Maybe 3 and 4.
Thank you so very much. Janeen, thank you for a great job.
Thank you for answering all my questions. Thank you so much. It's an honor to interview you. So thank you so much.
Happy to add my voice to that. You've done wonderfully.
Thank you so much.
And a happy Caribbean Heritage Month to all.
Okay.
To you also. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
All right, folks.